Morning. It's time to begin our class together. Welcome each of you here. It's good to have you here in person, and we do have those who are viewing online. We thank you for joining us in that way. This is a nice day here so far. The snow is melting. We feel like we're having a heat wave. Right now it's about 38 degrees, and it's good to see the weather forecast for the next several days where we hopefully get rid of the snow. We're studying in the book of Judges, just concluding the book this morning, and hopefully we'll get into the book of Ruth, and maybe someone could close those rear doors, because if I can hear the sound from here, I know you've got to hear it in the back, and that's got to be distracting for you. What did I say? There we go. Thank you, Zach. If you would be turning to chapter 17 of the book of Judges, we're going to dwell here just a few moments and look again at what is sometimes called the Danite migration and then the outrage at Gibeah. These are a couple of sometimes called appendices or additions that are added here at the end of the book or included in the historical account to give us an idea of just how far off God's people had gotten from his commands. And we'll look at those as we conclude the book of Judges this morning. Brother Don, would you start us with prayer, please?
Let's bow together. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your word. As we begin the study this morning, we ask you to help us to open our minds and hearts that we might take in the lessons that you've preserved for us in your word, that we might allow them to become a part of our thought and a part of our understanding, so that we might be better servants. We ask your blessing on Bob as he leads us this morning. Help him to point out those things that we need to hear in order to better prepare us to live the Christian life and to do the things that you would expect us to do as your people. Forgive us of sins, Father. Help us to grow in a spiritual way. For we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Studying the book of Judges should indeed, as Brother Don just prayed, help us to live the Christian life better. And again, one of the ways that happens is we see here what happens when we fail to adhere strictly to God's way, God's plan. Over and over we see statements like in chapter 17, verse 6, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So a setting aside of God's law, not carrying forth the directives that God had clearly laid out for them to drive out the inhabitants, to take possession of the land, to worship and serve him faithfully. These things were just not done. And one of the tribes that was certainly guilty, it would seem, of failing to drive out the inhabitants would be the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan. We did look at a map last time. Let me get that on the screen here. You notice that up in the very top, the little purple section, on this map, that's identified with near in and around the city of Dan, but also you have Dan down here in the southern portion of the land of Canaan, and it's a coastal area. I am told that the inhabitants of Dan did develop skill and prowess in sailing and in coastal trade and that sort of thing. So The Danite migration involves a number of men, military men, migrating from their original assigned territory to find a new place. Why did they do that? Why didn't they just be content and stay here in that which was assigned by Joshua? Why didn't they stay in their original area? Well, they were fearful of the natives, the Amorite people, and the Philistines, who on this map you can see maybe the word Philistine along the coast to the south. That area was a stronghold of the Philistines, and the Danites simply failed to conquer and to drive out the Philistines from their land. So they were never really able to take the land that had been assigned to them among the tribes of Israel. All right. In chapter 17, we find another departure concerning worship. You have a man by the name of Micah, and he stole property belonging to his mother, 1,100 pieces of silver. And then for some reason he faces up to it and acknowledges to his mother that he had taken them. He restores them, and his mother blesses him. Verse 3, verse 2, his mother said, "Blessed be my son of Jehovah." And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And then what did she do with those? She made a graven image. Yes, verse 5, the man Micah had a house of gods. Now some commentators say it was nothing more than like a private chapel. And he made an ephod and teraphim and consecrated one of his sons who became his priests. Again, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So instead of going to the ordained place to worship, they basically started worshiping where they were and on their own terms. They did basically as they pleased and as they thought was right. Verse 7 says, there was a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. Now, where is the Levites' land? On that map there, where is the Levites? They weren't given a land possession. And so the Levites, from whom the priests came, remember, they would roam the hillside, countryside, and they were depending upon the other tribes to support them financially. Sometimes that was done, sometimes it really wasn't. And you have a Levite here, and he sojourned there. And the man departed out of the city, out of Bethlehem, Judah, to sojourn where he could find a place. And he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And when we talk about the hill country of Ephraim, again, we're down here in this region of Dan. Ephraim is here just to the immediate east. That's a hilly, mountainous area. And Micah says to him, verse 10, "Dwell with me and be unto me a father and a priest, and I'll give thee 10 pieces of silver by the year and a suit of apparel." So he's basically saying, I'll support you if you will be my priest. Bringing in an actual Levite to assist in his worship duties and responsibilities. Chapter 18 begins with this statement. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and in those days, the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. Why were they seeking an inheritance? Because they had failed to take the land that they were assigned and that they should have taken down there in the further southern portion. In chapter 17, verse 13, the last verse there said, "Then said Micah, now know I that Jehovah will do me good, seeing I have a Levite to my priest." So it was almost like, if I can get me a priest from the tribe of Levite, God's going to bless me, And that was his ultimate goal. But the priest dwells with him for a time, but now notice what happens. The tribe of Dan is not situated properly where they belong, so they send out 5 men. Verse 2, the children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from their whole number, men of valor, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land, to search it. And they said, go search the land. So the city of Zorah, it's very difficult to see on this map, but it would be down here in the tribe of Dan, in the area assigned to Dan. They were from that area, but they were searching for a place to settle. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim unto the house of Micah and lodged there. All right. And they hear the voice of this young man, the Levite, who was there, and they recognized it. They recognized that voice. Are you one of us? Why are you here? What hast thou here? Who brought thee here? And so on, verse 3. And verse 7, then the 5 men departed and came to Laish. Now the city of Laish, that's verse 7, is all the way up here. And the best way I know to remember that, you remember in the New Testament the name of the city where Jesus asked Peter and the apostles, who do men say that I am? And Peter answered, and remember, Jesus said, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah. I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Where did that conversation occur? What city? Yeah, Caesarea Philippi, which is the most northern point that I believe that Jesus traveled in his earthly ministry. I mean, that's way up there. And Caesarea Philippi is right up there with this city that's mentioned here, Laish. They're very near each other. So these 5 men are looking for territory, looking for a place that the tribe of Dan can conquer and make their homeland, when they should have been focusing back where they had been assigned. And they find a people there that are how would you describe them, that were inhabiting that land, in that city? Say again? Lawless. Well, I don't know about lawless. Peaceful. They were sort of isolated. They were doing their own thing. They were separated from the Sidonians who could have provided support to them. They didn't have any allies close at hand. In other words, they were vulnerable. And these 5 men from Dan, the Danites, recognized, you know what, here's a people that we could probably conquer these people. And that's exactly the plan that they set in force. And so verse 11, they're set forth from thence of the family of the Danites out of Zorah and out of Eshtaol 600 men. Now these are Danites. They're soldiers. They are girt with weapons of war. They're military men. They're ready to conquer that city of Laish that the spies had told them about. But on their way, they come to the house of Micah. And they come to understand that he's got these items of worship there, and he's a priest. He has the teraphim and all of that, the ephod, the teraphim, the molten image. And what do they do with that priest? Well, they basically kidnap him. They take him. They say, you come with us. Wouldn't you rather be a priest over our whole tribe up here in our new territory rather than just to one family? And the priest agrees to come with them. So they're making kind of the same mistake that Micah made. As long as we can have this priest, it sort of legitimizes us and will enable us to worship God. You see how far off they've gotten from God's plan. And they take him, they go northward, and they basically destroy that city of Laish and conquer that city and make it their own. And that's why on the map you've got two Dans, one to the north, which surrounds that city of Laish, and one further south here. And by the way, the city of Dan up there in the north is used oftentimes in the expression describing the nation of Israel. When you're describing its whole area, that they would say all the way from Dan to Beersheba. Beersheba is a city in the southernmost portion of the kingdom. So if you say this is true from Dan to Beersheba, you're saying all across the whole nation. All right, any questions on that? Comments? The fight or battle was in the city that would become the city of Dan. At that time, it was called Laish, the city called Laish, Laish. Yes, near Caesarea Philippi later. Okay, any questions? That's the Danite migration. The other thing at the end of the book is found in chapters 19, 20, and 21, the outrage at Gibeah, a very heartbreaking. Well, before we get into 19, look at the end of chapter 18, verse 27. And they took that which Micah had made and the priest whom he had, and came to Laish unto a people quiet and secure, and smote them with the edge of the sword, and they burnt the city with fire. Verse 28 at the end, and they built the city and dwelt therein, and they called the name of the city Dan. So they set them up Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. By the way, Shiloh, which is where they had worshiped, that was back in the hill country of Ephraim. So what they've done is set up a new place to worship God, another violation, and they've got their own priest, and they're basically doing whatever they want to do, the Danites. Now, chapter 19, again, tells us about this is another horrific incident that illustrates just how far off the people had gotten. It begins with this same kind of language. Look at verse 1. And it came to pass in those days that there was no king in Israel. What's that telling? What's that code for? Doing what they want. Things have really gotten off track. There's no king. There's no respect for authority. And each man is basically doing as he pleases. And there was a certain Levite. Now here again, you see that worship and the worship system still enters in to their national decisions and local decisions from a political standpoint. There was a certain Levite sojourning on the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. A concubine was not a wife, but was used, usually sexually, by her owner as a husband to her. And the relationship between them would sometimes be very close and subject sometimes to the strains and the stresses of a marriage relationship. And here that's what happens. There's a falling out. Verse 2 says his concubine played the harlot against him and went away from him unto her father's house. Does anybody have a different translation that words that any differently in verse 2? Any substantial differences? Some scholars believe that that's not necessarily a sexual unfaithfulness, but it is a reference to more just a falling out, and she goes back to her father. But anyway, be that as it may, Her husband arose and went after her. So he's trying to reconcile with her and to speak kindly unto her, to bring her again, having his servant with him. And when he arrives, she is there with her father. That would be his father-in-law, as he's referred to in the text. Verse 4, and his father-in-law, the damsel's father, retained him, and he abode with him 3 days. So they did eat and drink and lodged there. It came to pass on the 4th day, they arose early in the morning, and he arose to depart. The damsel's father said, strengthen thy heart with a morsel of bread, and basically stay. And they go through this several times. He prepares to leave, but the father-in-law encourages him to stay, so he stays a little longer, stays a little longer, stays a little longer. Verse 10, finally, the man would not stay any longer. He wouldn't tarry that night, but he rose up and departed and came over against Jebus. Now, what is Jebus another name for? What city? Jerusalem. Where's Jerusalem on the map? Yeah, that's way down here. In the southern portion, that's where we are. And there were with him, he has his donkeys, his concubine also with him. And when they're at Jebus, the servant says we should stay here, spend the night here. But they go on a little further, and they come to a city called Gibeah. Gibeah. And were they able to find a lodging house in Gibeah? No. Verse 14, they passed on, went their way, and the sun went down upon them near to Gibeah, which belongeth to Benjamin. So Benjamin here is this orange area just to the east of Dan. The tribe of Benjamin. Who in the New Testament is a famous person descended from the tribe of Benjamin? Saul of Tarsus was, and Paul will later recount his own Jewish ancestry, and he says he's from the tribe of Benjamin. Now keep that in mind. The tribe of Benjamin had a very proud, warlike mentality, evidently. And there in Gibeah, verse 16, there came an old man from his work out of the field, and he basically tells them what? Don't stay in the street. Don't spend the night in the street. Come into my house. But the men of that city were so vulgar that they come beating on the house. Hey, where's that man that we saw, that stranger who came, and you brought him into your house? And verse 22 says, they were making their hearts merry. Behold, the men of the city, certain base fellows, beset the house round about, beating at the door. And they spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring forth the man that came into thy house, that we may know him. The word know there is used in the sexual sense. These are sodomites, and they are extremely base and wicked. What other event does this remind you of? Lot, very similar. The degradation of the homosexual mindset to the point where they would violate this man just because he's a man and a new man, somebody that they hadn't had before, and basically violently demanding, hey, bring him out to us that we can have sexual relations with him. And then this is strange to me. Verse 24, the old man says, behold, after saying, please don't do this, brothers, don't do this. This is a horrible perversion. Behold, here is my daughter, a virgin, and his concubine. Them will I bring out now, and humble ye them, and do with them what seemeth good unto you. But unto this man do not any such folly. I cannot understand that mindset. such pervert that he would offer his own daughter, number one, but also the guest's concubine, who was like a wife to his guest, telling these filthy men, have at it. Can anybody shed light on that for me? I don't get it, but that's what's happening here. They came and so the men basically abuse this concubine, rape her and abuse her all night long. And in the morning, when the man comes out to resume his journey, her lord, that is her husband, comes out to resume the journey. There she is, dead at the door. He tries to wake her up, and she's dead. Verse 27. And her lord rose up in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way. And behold, the woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house with her hands upon the threshold. He says, Up, and let us be going. But none answered. Then he took her up upon the ass, and the men rose up and gat him unto his place. And when he was come into his house, this is why the book of Judges is so difficult. Was it Dawn who said this is a very depressing book? Did you say that, Dawn? Yes. It is a depressing book because we're so far off from God's way. Incident like this would happen. So what does he do with this concubine who's now dead? He cuts her up into 12 pieces and sends a piece to each of the tribes to basically say, look at the horrible thing you have done. Jim? No. Concubine is not a prostitute. A prostitute would be typically a female that to whom the man would go for sexual satisfaction, who was not related in any way and not part of the household, and often for money, and usually illegally. A concubine was almost like an additional wife, but without the legal status of a wife, and she was used as a sexual assist, like a mistress, more like that.
None of which God ever approved.
Had never approved or been part of God's plan. Thank you, Chris. In case there's any doubt about that. All right, chapter 20. Then all the children, now think of that. Each tribe receives a piece of the body of this woman. Think of the outrage. And all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was assembled as one man from what to what? From Dan to Beersheba. Now, I just said, remember, that's sort of an expression or a code basically saying that the whole nation, and they are outraged. What in the world is going on? And what have the Gibeonites or the Benjamites allowed to happen, the degradation in their city? So they basically go to war against Benjamin. And I'm not going to read, all of the details of that, but the children of Benjamin, verse 15, we're told the children of Benjamin were numbered on that day out of the cities 26,000 men that drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who were numbered 700 chosen men. So in other words, 26,700 military men from that tribe, the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 17, and the men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men that drew the sword. And these were men of war. So on day one, they have a war. Israel pulls itself together and goes against their own brothers, against Benjamin. And on that day, did they succeed on day one? No, they lost 22,000 men. Now think of it. here we are, the nation of Israel, we're going to rise up and destroy this evil tribe, the tribe of Benjamin, and particularly the Gibeonites. And they are, instead, they suffer great loss themselves, and they lose 22,000 men. Day 2, Israel loses another 18,000 men. 18,000 men. And then they're wondering, is God with us in this or not? And verse 28, at the end there of the verse, Jehovah said, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver him into thy hand." That is Benjamin. And Israel, and then the strategy is outlined beginning in verse 29. For you military people, you'll see that their military strategy is very effective. And on day 3, they prevail, and Benjamin loses 25,100 men. Verse 35, and Jehovah smote Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed of Benjamin that day 25,100 men. All these drew the sword. So this is a decisive destruction of Benjamin. That tribe was, in terms of their army, their military men, was practically wiped out as a result. Now think about how tragic this is. Benjamin was one of the proud tribes of the nation. And here they are, almost totally destroyed. Not totally, but almost totally destroyed. In verses 44 and 45, you have sort of a summary. And you can look at the numbers there. There fell of Benjamin 18,000 men. All these were men of valor. And they turned and fled toward the wilderness under the rock of Rimmon, and they gleaned of them in the highways 5,000 men, and followed hard after them unto Gidom, and smote of them 2,000 men. Verse 46, so that all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men that drew the sword. All these were men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness unto the rock of Rimmon, and abode there. And the men of Israel turned again upon the children of Benjamin, and smote them with the edge of the sword, both the entire city and the cattle and all that they found. Moreover, all the cities which they found they set on fire. So this is just a horrible massacre of the tribe of Benjamin. There are some survivors. We're told in chapter 21 that the people repented, that those who were left of Benjamin, that they repented. They acknowledged what a horrible sin they had committed. They proclaimed peace. And there is a restoration of relationships between Benjamin and the other tribes. But what problem does that leave for the surviving men of Benjamin, this 600 men? What problem now do they have? No wives. All of our land, our people have been massacred, been destroyed. By the way, in verse 6 of chapter 21, we read, and the children of Israel repented them for Benjamin their brother. Notice how that's worded. Benjamin their brother. And said, there is one tribe cut off from Israel this day. So had they not come up with a plan to provide wives for these 600, that tribe would have been extinct. It would have gone out of existence. And they knew that would be a tragedy. So they come up with this plan, wives for the Benjamites. And you've got the city of Jabesh Gilead, and at Shiloh, there were women in those cities. Verse 13 says, and the whole congregation sent and spake to the children of Benjamin that were in the rock of Rimmon, and proclaimed peace unto them. Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead, and yet so they sufficed them not. In other words, that wasn't enough women for all of them. And the people repented them for Benjamin because that Jehovah had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. And then there's a question in verse 16, what about the remainder? How do we get enough wives for those remaining men? And there must be an inheritance, they say. Verse 18, howbeit we may not give them wives of our daughters, for the children of Israel had sworn, saying, cursed be he that giveth a wife to Benjamin. So they had already ruled out giving their own daughters. So they said, there is a feast of Jehovah from year to year in Shiloh. So they've already gotten the women from Jabesh Gilead. Now they're looking at the city of Shiloh, which is on the north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south of Leboah. And they commanded the children of Benjamin, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards and see, and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances. So they apparently had a festival of some kind. These women, young women, are dancing in the festivals. And it shall be when their fathers or their brethren come to complain unto, verse 21, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come ye out of the vineyards and catch you every man his wife of the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. So that's how they got wives for the Benjamites. Verse 22, and it shall be when their fathers or their brethren come out to complain. Well, wouldn't you complain? Grant them graciously unto us, because we took not for each man of them his wife in battle. In other words, we didn't destroy your city and take your women. We just grabbed them when they were out dancing at the festival. Else would ye now be guilty. And the children of Benjamin did so, and took them wives according to their number of them that danced, whom they carried off. And they went and returned unto their inheritance, and built the cities, and dwelt in them. And the children of Israel departed thence at that time, every man to his tribe and to his family, and they went out from thence, every man to his inheritance. And then this last verse, as if to say, you can believe it if you want to, what I've just told you. But here's why. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So with that, we conclude our study of the book of Judges. Again, sort of a depressing study, and you see what happens when men get far away from God. By the way, the farther we get away from God, the harder it is on women. Why? Well, you can think about that. Marvina, did you have a question or comment?
Totally blown away by all this. And I couldn't understand why there were so many similarities between the two stories. So I Googled the distance between Gilead and Sodom, and they were very close.
Okay.
So maybe that was a typical thing that went on.
Maybe some remnant of that perversion still in that area, I don't know. The cities of the plain had been destroyed thoroughly, though, by God. But maybe some cultural remnants of that lifestyle, I don't know. It's a good question.
Pretty close to Sodom and Gomorrah then too, because our nation's not far behind.
Yeah, there's a lot of warning signs here. But if you're ever thinking, how horrible things are, just remember, it could be worse. This is just outrage all the way around. Yeah. Yeah. Today we have a lot of the same mindset, but it's pronounced as a good thing in many areas. All right. Well, I guess I had to go through that. And the book of Ruth is really going to change the complexion of our study, because now we come to one of the bright spots in the whole Bible. In my view, the book of Ruth is one of the most uplifting, encouraging, warm, loving books of the Bible. And it is just the polar opposite from what we've just studied. The book of Ruth and its 4 little chapters is a tiny book, but it fills a giant place in the Bible. And basically, for next week, if you would, read carefully the book in its entirety and think about this. Was that the first bell, John? Yeah, thank you. How does the book of Ruth fit into God's plan of salvation? Why is it included in the Old Testament? What do we learn from it? Pick up a copy of today's bulletin and read last week's bulletin, if you haven't done that already. Last Sunday's bulletin is called Some Beautiful Takeaways from the Book of Ruth. There are 4 or 5 real major lessons from the book that really help us today. So think about that for next week, if you would. The book opens with the man by the name of Elimelech. And Elimelech has how many sons? 2 sons, and he's married to whom? Naomi. So you got to get the parties straight right off the bat. You have Elimelech and Naomi married. They live where? Bethlehem, Judah. So of what race are they? They're Jewish. They are Jewish. They are descendants of the people we've been studying about in the book of Judges. And how many sons do they have? 2 sons. Their names are given there in verse 2, Mahlon and Chilion. They are Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. So again, Bethlehem would be on the map here, where? Right in this area, am I right? Here's Jerusalem. So Bethlehem is just, I know you can't see it, but hopefully you can see the general colored area here. This is Judah. And Bethlehem would be in that, Bethlehem of Judah would be right there in the northern portion of that tribe. Okay? About 10 miles north of Jerusalem. Thank you, Dawn. And what happens, the 2 sons take them wives from the women of Moab. Why did they come into Moab? Famine. There are many places in the history of God's people where God uses famines or other natural catastrophes to bring about his will. And this is one of them, I believe. They come into the land of Moab. Remember that the Moabites were sort of half relatives of the Jewish people, and they were despised generally, looked down on by the Jews. And they take them wives. The 2 sons take Moabitess wives. The name of the one wife was Orpah, and the name of the other was what? Ruth. So Ruth becomes a daughter-in-law to Naomi, okay? Now, in the course of time, of course, Elimelech dies, and the 2 sons die. So all that is left is Naomi, that's the mother-in-law, and her 2 daughters-in-law. And where are they? In Moab. They are not in Naomi's homeland. They're in the homeland of the girls, the daughters-in-law. And when the famine eases up and it's necessary for Naomi to return to her homeland because her husband is dead, her sons are dead, she needs to go back to her homeland where her extended family is. What does she tell her daughters-in-law to do? You go back to your homes here in Moab. You just stay in your own homeland. After much persuasion, Orpah finally decides to do that. But what does Ruth do? she says, no, I'm going to come with you. Wherever you go, I'm going to stick with you. One of the most beautiful passages in all of the Bible as we close, verse 16 of chapter 1, and Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee and to return from following after thee, for whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. Jehovah, do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. If anything but death separates us, then let the Lord do that to me. So a beautiful sentiment, beautiful commitment on her part, a beautiful passage, and we'll take up with that, Lord willing, look at the rest of the book next week. Okay? Thank you.